I think he was, but not important. So he was the governor of New York. Thus, he was in the hands of the Jesuit order. He was a hero of the San Juan Hill Charge. High-level Mason.
Oh, Teddy was governor of New York. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but Roosevelt was the governor of New York.
Yes, he was. Yes, without doubt.
And so he's in with all the big merchants that the Jesuits control out of their haven there in their command of New York City, because it's the biggest, most productive commercial port in the country. And you can know that the Archbishop is making millions off the skimming of the tariffs, of the excises being collected out of that port. And so Roosevelt, he becomes president. He becomes the abject slave of the papacy. What does he do? He reverses McKinley's policy of a protective tariff. You have the 1909 Act, reversing that. He reverses McKinley's policy of busting the big trusts and the monopolies. And he also creates the Bureau of Investigation in 1908, which later becomes Wicked Hoover's Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Yes, not created by an act of Congress.
Not created by an act of Congress. It was created by executive order.
Right.
And the Bureau of Investigation was called the bureaucratic bastard by congressmen, quote unquote, so that they could dig up the affairs of private men's lives and then use that as blackmail. Is that not one of the chief purposes of the FBI today?
Without a doubt. But I'm going to ask you this also, and you knew I was going to throw this at you.
Okay.
What the attempt on Teddy?
It was a hoax. It was just like the attempt on Roosevelt. It was on FDR.
On FDR,
it was a hoax. It was just like the attempt on Napoleon III by Orsini. It was a hoax. They never intended to kill him.
Well, the guy took a bullet in his glass case. I mean, that was pretty real.
Yeah, that was real, but it was not designed. Maybe there's something more to it. From what I know now, it was a token assassination attempt. But there may be more to it.
And admittedly, we talked about this, and that is a little bit problematic. I don't know, and I didn't research his views. I mean, we believe he was handled without a doubt. This is Teddy Rex Roosevelt.
But there's two more things.
All right, go do it.
Two more things. He creates the Bureau of Investigation in 1908. He creates the wicked FDA in 1906 that is oppressing all of us.
Which we're still suffering from now.
Which we're suffering from now.
Without a doubt, yep.
Okay, and he creates the NAACP in New York City in 1909. It's either Roosevelt or Taft, but it's created in 1909 for the purpose of forced amalgamation of the races to make North America a nation of color, just like Central America and South America, and a nation of color cannot resist the designs of the Jesuit order. At least that is what they believe.
Okay.
So that's what Theodore Roosevelt did.
Can we move on to Warren Harding, which nobody really remembers was even president, and this guy probably screwed up more ways than Sunday. Do you think this is political, or just because he just screwed up all the bananas?
No, Warren Harding, again, was a conservative, financially speaking. He lowered the income tax. He wanted to raise protective tariffs. He was an honest money man. He created himself very powerful enemies who did not want to go along with the enfranchisement of the black per se. Those people had to be ultimately silenced, but they had power in the time of Warren Harding's day. Harding, when I was at the Civil Rights Center there in Birmingham just a couple of days ago, I learned that he said when he was asked to speak in Birmingham, he said that there are certain blacks who are able to vote, and therefore they should be allowed to vote. And he said there are certain whites that are incapable of voting, and they should not be allowed to vote.
Okay.
Speaking of all the Roman Catholic immigrants who couldn't even speak English that were making up Birmingham. Because the Jesuits brought in all the Roman Catholic Italians to work in the mines there.
You saw this actually in the Birmingham Museum?
It's in the Birmingham Civil Rights Museum.
Holy mackerel.
Yeah, right there.
Okay.
So it's narrated by the lady when you sit down to hear the first introduction. This lady's narrating it on a record. And I almost fell off my chair. So I had to write that because I always bring notebooks, so I wrote it down then. So Warren Harding created very powerful enemies. At the time of Warren Harding, we also must remember that you have the Bolshevik Revolution is raging, and that's being financed by New York.
That's right.
It's being fed by the Jesuits using their American Relief, bringing food over to the Bolsheviks to make sure that revolution doesn't fail. And who do they use? They use Herbert Hoover.
Hoover and Rockefeller.
And Rockefeller.
That's right. And Schiff, yeah.
So Warren Harding was not going along with the program, and he was also a Baptist.
Really?
He was a Baptist.
Well, what about all the trysts and stuff like that? I mean,
About the what?
Well, he supposedly had that famous affair. Does this really factor in, or is this generated?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's something I have to check out yet.
All right, good deal. Okay.
But they had to slam Harding. Either the affair was real or not, I don't know, but they had to magnify that, just as they magnify it with Kennedy. I think they magnify his affairs, but they don't get into the reason why he would be killed.
Mm-hmm.
We must shame his name through a mistake or a supposed mistake he made in the past, so as we can't get to the heart of what he really did and who he was resisting. So they poisoned Harding.
All right, now we have the attempt. I thought you think that or no, that the Chicago mayor Chermak was the victim, who was a passenger with FDR in the back seat in a certain entourage.
That's right. According to my source, it was a mafia hit on the Chicago mayor.
All right, so this wasn't a warning shot across FDR's bow.
No, FDR was doing everything he was supposed to do. As soon as he got into office, what does he do? The first thing he does is he recognizes Joseph Stalin's government, his wicked, bloody government. So now American corporations can legitimately begin trade.
That's right. Also, he Sovietizes the United States, as William Z. Forster foretold in his book, Toward Soviet America. We know that depression was the reason for it, but we know that depression was cooked.
Right.
To bring in all this...
Joe Kennedy caused it.
Yeah, I mean, but it was caused to Sovietize us, except we call it federal.
That's correct.
That makes it okay.
The New Deal was all socialism, and it never brought us any closer to being out of debt.
Oh, no.
From 1929 to 1938, we were still in the deep depression.
What do you think, as we leave this, about Fletcher Pouty's remembrance of a conversation between Stalin and Roosevelt's son Elliot? It goes blah blah blah. Have you ever heard this?
No, I haven't.
All right. Okay, let me go into it real quick. Black Op Radio does a nice job, and they recounted what Prouty apparently said or heard or whatever. An exchange between Stalin and Elliot Roosevelt. Roosevelt said, "Why did you not let my mother come into Russia?" And he said, "Because you would not let my emissaries," I think it was Gromyko at the time, one of the two, go in and visit the body of your father, obviously who was in state. And he said, well, my father, just died, whatever. And Stalin said, no, he didn't die. He was killed by Churchill's gang.
Oh, yeah, I've heard this story.
All right, that's a rich exchange. What do you think about that?
Well, I have no doubt that FDR was poisoned at Warm Springs, Georgia, without a question.
But why, though? Do you think he was I thought he might have been reticent about unleashing both A-bombs on Japan.
That's correct. That's what I think, too. I think he was not going to go along with that. And I also think that he was not going to go along with the rape, pillage, and destruction of post-war Germany, where 2 million Germans were killed. Okay, after the war. So there were some reasons where he had to be eliminated. And according to Emanuel Josephson, in his book, The Strange Death of FDR, he said he was slipped a silver cord at Yalta.
All right.
He was poisoned at Yalta, yeah. And it was a long-term poisoning, lasting months. And he lost weight, he became sicker and sicker, and then ultimately dies. And he dies in the arms of his girlfriend there in Warm Springs. Yeah.
Really?
Right, yeah. Eleanor wasn't around anyway. He couldn't stand her.
Well, those Democrats, man.
Yeah. But no, that happened, and but as far as Stalin's concerned, he was a high-level Freemason, tool of the order. So was FDR, so was Churchill.
I think I might afford you these photos. If not, I have them, and I was starting to put this up on the website, but you've got to see the handshakes. You know where I'm going with this. When Harry comes in there with Stalin and Churchill, I mean, there are apprentice grips around the house.
Right.
It is such a joke. I tell you, if I've sent you anything, you've seen them. We're not making this stuff up. I mean, and Harry, let's face it, was he the most willing Freemason in the world?
Oh, I think so, sure. He was 33rd degree, created the CIA, was completely in the hands of the Jesuit order. He had nothing but good press, and he was a dirty, filthy traitor. behind the nuclear war hoax, Cold War hoax, all of it.
And of course, we recounted on this show, reading the book by retired Admiral Robert Theobald, Final Secrets of Pearl, that Dewey was aware, like the whole world was really, that FDR let that Pearl Harbor thing happen, and Dewey wanted to hammer him in 44, and his own party, the Republicans as well as the Democrats, said, shut up.
Right.
And he did, and he lost, and of course, if you'll excuse me, we remember the famous photo of Truman holding up the paper, Dewey wins.
Right.
That was another whiplash during the night reversal of the election. Do you not think?
Oh, absolutely.
So they got their guy, Freemason Harry, who was just, hey, whatever you want to do, we're going to do.
That's right. I had a Japanese missionary friend. He's died. Went to be with the Lord. His name is Daniel Fuji.